So Molly, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about your background with photography and content and video creation?
Sure. So my background is not that traditional in photography because I majored in environmental studies and international relations at Tufts University, and I ended up minoring in multimedia arts, so with a film and photography focus. And the reason is I kind of added that halfway through my studies. I was studying abroad in East Africa and I was seeing all this amazing wildlife. I was studying wildlife biology and wildlife management. And meanwhile, I had taken my camera. I had a passion for photography. I had taken a bunch of classes just on the side, kind of because I loved it. And all of a sudden, I was like, okay, this is what I like. I don't know why I didn't click before, but this is what I have to be doing. And I just felt like the wildlife conservation issues that I was seeing could actually be helped by raising more awareness and empathy and connecting people to wildlife through visual storytelling, and that could actually be really useful and wasn't just kind of a capricious fun thing for me to do. And I was like, all right, I'm going to try to combine these things. And so then I ended up interning at National Geographic Television, learning a little bit just firsthand, working with the team that I was assigned to there, interned at PBS Nature as well. And then I ended up graduating, moving to Southeast Asia, and starting as a freelance photographer and filmmaker, mostly on conservation topics at that point.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that is a non-traditional route, but it actually ties in. It's kind of nice because it really ties in your passions, and your areas of interest. So, and that kind of stuff reflects in the content you create. So that's a good thing. Um, so along those lines, and um, with the environmental background and environmental interest, um, from your perspective too, what makes a good or compelling photo or image that you're going after?
Um, I feel like everyone must have such a different answer to this. For me, because a lot of my storytelling I feel like is impact driven. For me, a good image or a good photograph or a good film makes you feel something. So if I see an image that makes me feel something, that reaches the heart, that makes me feel it, for me that's the power of visual storytelling. Like you might know the facts, but when you see that image, it brings it home for you in some way that's more kind of in the gut or in the heart. That's, to me, when I feel like that happens in an image, that's what a successful image is for me.
And and kind of going along those lines too, when you're when you're out there photographing, whether it's with a still camera or a drone or something like that, what what are some I, I I don't know how to even explain it, but how do you go after to find that moment? Like, where do you just kind of, you're always observing using your peripheral vision to kind of look for things, or how do you go about to to capture that moment?
Um, so it's different with every kind of different topic that you might be photographing or story, but I think that the most important thing is making, with wildlife or with people, um, getting comfortable together as much as you can. Um, because yeah, kind of that the comfort level of the person that you're photographing is going to come through in the image, and I really want people to be able to be their authentic selves and not be thinking about the camera anymore. And I think that's like what can kind of bring about those images that have more feeling to them, because they're the real feeling, they're the real emotion that that person might be having, and not their reaction to you as the photographer. And with wildlife too, like sometimes you have to spend some time in a place so that maybe an animal will get used to your presence and not have a big reaction to you and just kind of go about normal activities. Maybe then you can kind of capture more of a natural moment that might have more impact or be more true to what's happening.
Yeah, you hear the stories of Nat Geo photographers and stuff that are, you know, rolling out there in the dirt and trying to get rid of their smell and scent so they can blend in and not be obtrusive and kind of blend in with the animals. So that's that's a skill in of itself. But as
Yeah.
a as as a Nat Geo explorer, um, with when you're going out there looking for stories, what kind of content or stories do you look for usually?
I'm usually looking for stories that have um, the potential for impact and that have hopefully a personal side that will draw you into it and bring it home and feel less kind of out there and removed. Uh, so that's very broad, but and something else I look for is sometimes kind of some sort of question, whether it's a conflict or whether it's something that's going to make you think. um I don't like when a story is just like really straightforward. Like I like for there to be a little bit of, you know, a search trying to find something out, to find something through the images to bring people closer. And so if there's a potential for that, if there's a potential for creating more empathy and understanding of something or someone through getting closer to that, that is what really attracts me. And I also specifically, I really love stories that have to do with relationships between people and animals. So personally, I tend to look for those stories because I just love seeing the connections that we have to the natural world and to animals. I mean, even pets, like those unexpected or maybe sometimes expected now, with our pets, maybe they're more expected, but kind of connections that we can forge with the natural world is they're really cool. I find them fascinating. So personally, I seek them out because I really enjoy that.
Yeah, there's so many stories, and so many possibilities, I guess, from just a regular human interest level, as far as with humans and wildlife and humans and animals and so there's plenty out there to cover, I guess, to find. So and I guess
Yeah.
just being curious,
Yeah, being curious. You're always going to find something if you're curious. I mean, wherever you go, there's always that's what I mean by the question. If there's a question there, if there's something to find out, there's probably an interesting story there. Um, and yeah, and I'm always looking for that empathy, for that opportunity to to build empathy, to create more understanding of maybe misunderstood um, people or animals or situations.
right? Because you want the audience to connect with whatever you're trying to say or whatever your main characters are doing or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. And especially, I had a question, but I'll ask that one later. Um, but I guess going out now, um, going out in the taking pictures of wildlife and going after these stories, you're thinking about things in like different perspectives, right? So you're thinking of, um, you know, I see this person, I see the story between this trainer, this villager, and this elephant, and the bond that they have, kind of a thing, and you started thinking, well, this is kind of along the lines of what I was going to ask is, do you start thinking like beginning, middle, end of a story, or do you just kind of, when you find a story, you just kind of write it until it ends, or how do you go about that kind of, you know I know this is a story and I'm just going to kind of go with it, or I've already kind of storyboarded the whole thing out? Which way do you go, or do you do both?
That's such a good question. I think it depends on the story. And Usually what I try to do is just sit down and talk with people a lot before I really even start photographing or filming. So I'll learn a lot through those conversations before the visuals kind of come into the equation. And I feel like with that information, I'll be thinking about, okay, like if they're telling me, like that was a great example. So in the story that I did through a Nat Geo grant on the relationship between people and elephants in Myanmar, it was like, okay, there's so many aspects of this story I need to learn about. And I started learning about, okay, there's a spiritual, cultural connection there. There's spiritual beliefs kind of in the background that influence the current cultural beliefs and traditions surrounding elephants. Um, and then, you know, specific places that these things are taking place. And okay, and there's also elephants in the wild. And what is that going to look like? And so I try to come up kind of with a broad picture of what the story is going to be. And then as I go into each piece of that story, I might have had kind of an idea of, all right, I want a mix of images of this aspect of the story, of the cultural aspect, but I also want the nature and the conservation aspect. And so I want, you know, I want to make sure that I get images of this and of that, but maybe I'm going to find something completely unexpected once I go into the community where um, there's this guy who lives with his elephant and they have this special connection. And I thought that it was going to be about the timber trade because they work in the timber industry together, but really it turns out that it's about you know, his baby and how his baby and a baby elephant are learning to connect with each other. And I never would have imagined that that even happened. So I won't know until I go there and I talk to them and I see
Mhm.
what's going on. So a lot of times, yeah, I'll have kind of this big idea and I'll have kind of an arc in mind of how it might flow and how images might work together. But a lot of times it'll change completely once I actually talk to people and go into each part of the story. Um, and it'll be like feeling it out just there in the moment.
Right. So you have the initial idea, but you're open to go down a rabbit hole or go in a different way if you all of a sudden, oh, there's the story kind of a thing. You
I
know,
go into a lot of rabbit holes. It's I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but sometimes like I'll start on this one path and suddenly I'll find this fascinating thing and I'm like, well, I have to go in that direction and find where it goes, you know? Maybe it'll be better, maybe I'll find that it doesn't suit the story, but I always feel like it's worth being curious and checking out something. If you find a new aspect to your story that you never expected, you may as well see.
oh, oh, for sure. Yeah. And then also you got to, you know, you're always thinking too, one, you're curious, but my audience would like this, or whoever, you know, other people would be interested in this. It's not just, you know, my own personal curiosity, but yeah, this people would be into this, you know, they'd like to
Yeah,
know that
yeah.
story.
Yeah, for sure. Thinking about, you know, when probably most of us have never seen a baby getting to know a young elephant. I never have. Maybe people who are from that area have seen it more frequently, but for me and probably for most of the people who are going to see the story, it's going to be something new and exciting. And yeah,
Right.
it's fun to find those moments.
Definitely. Definitely. Um, so this is a drone film festival. So when we talk about like the equipment and that kind of stuff, what, from your experience and from what you see, what do drones add, or what do they bring to storytelling now?
Well, for me, as when I'm watching a film, it gives kind of this breathing room, this feeling of kind of zooming out and taking a moment. Sometimes I feel like those moments can be like amazing transition points. For wildlife, it's incredible because you get a complete different perspective on what's going on in the landscape. You get a complete different perspective on animal behavior potentially. I remember when I did that internship at National Geographic many years ago. there were a lot of aerial shots of this wolf chase. And it was fascinating because from the air you get this whole different perspective, and they were shooting from the ground and from the air, and you're like, it's like a whole different experience having that perspective, especially with wildlife for me, because you can't plan it, you don't know where they're going to go, but from the sky you have kind of this broad view of what's going on and more context and more behavior there. And also I think for still photography as well, um, that that feeling that we talked about, like trying to get to the feeling of an image, and especially within a collection of images like a photo essay, I feel like it gives diversity to a set of images, and it also, with with nature again, it gives you a feel of what the place is and kind of that feeling of awe. Like I always feel like it's breathtaking or it's awe-inspiring to see something from the air and to really feel like this huge expansive feeling often that shots from the drone kind of give you this feeling of like of the big landscape or the incredible jungle or the savannah, and yeah, you translate that into this feeling of like connecting with the place, giving a sense of place. It's a really long answer.
No, it's great. Yeah, I mean, it's great for people to hear that, because there's a lot of things that, especially, you know, using drones for content creation and photography and stuff. There's some things maybe or you think, it might be along those lines, but to hear somebody else maybe articulate it or explain a little bit more, it's like, oh, and it's not just me. Oh, that is the thing. That is what it is. So it
Yeah,
kind of helps them look for the idea, or maybe they didn't know and they're like, oh yeah, this would give a different perspective, especially with landscape or wildlife or something like that. So good
yeah.
answer.
Thanks.
But along the wildlife and landscape, so the environmental and landscape category that we have, for example, is one that's pretty widely entered, and that's typical with a lot of drone film festivals and stuff. And so there's a lot of people out there, I imagine, watching this that are interested in, maybe their aspirations it would be to do some projects or do some work for Nat Geo. Um, what are some tips or some advice that you have for creating content that's like Nat Geo like, or in that range?
um well, I think their standard is very, very high for quality of footage. The cameras or the drones you're shooting with have to be good, and you have to really work on good technique. But I feel like I see so much unbelievably amazing work that there's so much out there. It's still, it's, even if your work is really, really amazing, sometimes it can be really hard to reach National Geographic, as amazing as your film or your photography might be. So I always tell people that make sure that your work is high quality, and make sure that you're telling stories and that your image quality is really good, but that you're telling a story, that you have an arc and that you have a purpose to the story. And they tend to really like impact driven storytelling as well, so that can be helpful. um, but I always tell people also to look at their grants, because sometimes if you just reach out of the blue, and they don't know your work yet, it will be hard to get an assignment. But say you have a project in mind, you already have it researched, you have access to the story, and maybe you even have shot a little bit of something already. Applying to one of their Explorer grants can be really great, because it gives you visibility. Like they're gonna check out your work when you're done with the grant. It doesn't mean if they give you the grant, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to publish the work that you create with that grant, but you're getting it in front of the right people, and that can be a great first step. So I always recommend that to people. There's something called early career grants. They're kind of shifting right now, especially with COVID going on. So we'll see, but to keep an eye on their website, and they tend to announce their new grants there, and I think it's really useful. Um, that's what I did, and I found it to be a really great experience.
And something that you said too, so with Nat Geo having such high standards and kind of, you know, setting the bar high, that maybe it's unattainable, you know, for many people, because that's the way they want really good quality. But if everybody strives for that, or if you're out there and you're striving to do that, and you're striving good quality, you got good equipment, even if you don't make Nat Geo, you're going to make some amazing content, you know, in and of itself, that people will still want to see and watch and stuff. So
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. Well, and you know what? Like in terms of um, the quality of the footage and the cameras and everything like that, I think that comes second. The first is practicing storytelling, um, getting it out there. Also, you know, National Geographic is one of so many different publications out there that are doing such important and putting out such important work. So I won't say it's the only one, but for any, I think for any publication, if you work first on telling stories and learning how to put together a good story, and it's funny, like there was one specific anecdote that came to mind recently when I was interning at PBS Nature. I remember asking them, like, how can I work on learning how to shoot for someone like you guys? Because you know, I was interning in production, I was in the office, I was seeing how everything was going on, but I really wanted to learn more about how to do it myself and get out in the field. And I remember their producer telling me, go out and shoot like whatever animals in your backyard. If it's a squirrel, shoot a story about the squirrel and whatever it's doing and make it a story. Like make an arc and make it happen. And like with that, you'll have so much more to show than if you have great camera equipment, but you don't have a story, right? Because the camera equipment can be solved. You can rent it. Somebody might even sponsor you if you have a really great story. If you get a National Geographic grant, it's way easier to get sponsorships. I'll put that out there. So even if your gear isn't amazing, but if you can kind of like put together grants to get great gear because you have an amazing story and you know how to shoot with the gear you have, um, I feel like that's really the first step. So yeah, and whether it's Nat Geo or somewhere else, it's great to tell the stories and get them out there. And there's so many publications with such a huge reach right now, especially with everything being online. It's kind of amazing.
Right. And yeah, like I said, if you aspire to that, and you kind of set yourself to high standards, to high, you know, I'm going to do the best I can, I'm going to do the best quality I can, then if again, you're going to hit someplace, you're going to get published, or somebody's going to see you, or you're going to be able to get some exposure out there. And I like what you said um, about equipment. Equipment is great, and I always preach this too. The equipment doesn't tell the story, the person tells the story, right? So you have to guide the equipment in order to tell the story. So, you know, it's not the latest and greatest piece of equipment that's going to make it or break your story, but you know, you have to do that first, and then let the equipment guide you or go with you, but it's you first. So I like what you said about that.
Yeah, yeah. And as you grow as a storyteller, um, you know, your gear is gonna change over time, but you as a storyteller, if you keep growing, whatever gear, you're gonna make the most out of whatever gear you have. And I feel like that is what matters more than anything else.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've talked to a number of Pulitzer Prize winning photojournalists, and um, you know, they just use equipment they've had for, you know, 10 years, they're just comfortable with it. They know how to work it. They know how to use it, and they can capture those images, those moments, um, because they know where to go, they know where to look, and they know kind of what the stories are doing. So it's it's on them. So yeah, I was
Yeah,
also it's not the equipment,
absolutely. Absolutely. Like you have to have a certain basic level of, quality, but there's so much gear out there right now that even like older
Yeah.
secondhand gear can be like extremely high quality at this point.
Right, exactly. So you can last for some older stuff and still do quality work. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I mean, I'm the same with my gear. Like I tend to hold on to my cameras for as long as possible because I know them. I like
yeah.
to work with the camera that I've used for years, and it's really hard for me to switch
Right, exactly.
to let go of that one. I'm like, this one has history, man.
Exactly. We've got a past. We're good. That's funny. But so so with what you're doing, kind of just to bring this to a close, but what are some things that you're working on or you're looking forward to work on, that you want to disclose? Maybe you don't want to tell too many projects that you're working on, but what are some things or maybe there's something that's off in the distance that, oh, I'd really like to go after that kind of story or something. What's stuff that you might want to do or what you are doing?
Um, so right now I'm working on a story in the southeast of Mexico on a situation that's brought about by climate change and is affecting the Baird's tapir, which is a super interesting animal that I only recently really learned about. Kind of looks like a mix between like an anteater and an elephant and a pig, or it's hard to really describe, but they're amazing. And they're having a lot of issues right now with drought. Well, flooding and then drought, and then flooding and then drought, which a lot of people are attributing to climate change. And this is leading to that species, which is really water dependent, to come out of the forest looking for water and overlapping a lot more with human settlements, highways, a lot of different places that are putting them at more risk. So it's kind of a story about that situation to bring climate change into kind of a more uh, to look at a specific species and make it a little more personal. And they're really charismatic species. They're adorable, and to show like, look, this is really happening. Here's an animal that this has completely changed how they live in this space, and the risks that they're facing. And um, yeah, so I'm following that story this year, and it's been really interesting. And I've been able to use a drone to capture some of the photographs that I'll be using for that project, and it's great. It's been able. It gives me a lot of context. The drone gives me a lot of context because a lot of these areas where the tapirs are living are areas that are forested, thick forest, and then all of a sudden, in the middle of the forest, there's a farm, right? And these farms are where they're going for water because there'll be like uh, areas that are dug out, and so it's a source of water for their agricultural plots. And so they're coming and they're eating whatever their crops are, and they're drinking that water, and maybe people hunt them, or maybe people try to get them off of their land and they don't want them eating their crops and destroying their livelihood. So there's a conflict there that there never was before. But if you see that image, you can really understand like why they're right up against this farmland, because the farmland is this little square in the middle of this expansive forest that's a lot drier. So it's interesting to be able to use the drone for that.
No, that's great. I've seen them at the San Diego Zoo, and
Oh, there you
so I know
go.
when he said it, I was like, oh, I know what that looks like.
They're really cool. I just
Yeah,
love them.
they're really different looking, but they're. It's one of those things where it's like they're cute, but not. It's one that
Yeah, they're really weird.
Yeah,
They're
they're
really
weird. Yeah,
weird. I feel like they're cute when you get to know them, and their personality is like they're a lot like horses. They're actually like
Oh,
related to the horse. And they have these personalities that remind me so much of horses. I grew up with horses, and I
mhm.
was like, you guys have that same kind of curious disposition, but they're also super weird and like they're like ugly cute.
Right, right. Yeah. Like I said, I looked at him like, I haven't made up my mind about you.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. So, well, that's great though. Are there any things that maybe, you far off down the road, like, oh, I want to tackle this topic or anything like that, that there's one that you're constantly chasing or going after?
Yeah. I have one a little bit farther down the road, whenever travel is possible again. That is actually a grant that two friends and I were awarded to do a project in the Philippines and in Hong Kong about turtle trade between the countries, illegal turtle trade.
Oh no, that'll be good. Yeah.
And so I'm going to make a short film there along with the two of them whenever I'm able to travel there again.
Right.
Um, yeah, but that'll be on Palawan. So Palawan is going to be, I think it would be really cool to get some aerials of that. It's a
Oh,
beautiful place. The landscape
definitely.
is
You know,
incredible.
my mind goes to drones at first, so I'm thinking, oh, that'll be great, especially if you have the turtles out there. Oh, yeah, that'll be good
Yeah,
because you got to give the scope and everything the perspective. So,
absolutely. Absolutely.
well, great. I don't want to take up much more of your time, but yeah, this has been great. Thank you for sharing some of your insight with everybody.
Thank you so much. It has been great. It was really nice to chat with you, and I hope everyone enjoys the festival. I can't wait to check out all the films. It's going to be great.
Well,
Thank
thanks.
you so much for putting it together.
Yeah.